I speak better than most white people too.
Let's talk about that word articulate. You were reading something, a statement about Kamala Harris's, and I think they misused the flavor of a word. They said she needs to do something to differentiate herself. Differentiate, 5-syllable word. And that's not what they mean. You and I don't need to differentiate ourselves from each other because you're a taller, more beautiful woman and I'm a shorter, older man, whatever. Distinguish is the word they're looking for. She needs to do something to distinguish herself from the Biden administration. And this is what I mean about the flavor of words that we got into. And I think the people who said, wow, you're articulate, it could be a microaggression. But it may likely be that they wanted to say, wow, you're so eloquent, meaning we're all.
Well, let's give some context, right? So before we started recording this episode of the show, I was telling Eric that I've often been called by white people like that I'm very articulate. And even Eric said, how did you describe me? You didn't use the word articulate, but that's kind of how we got into the conversation. You described me as like I have a way with words
Well,
and
I was just saying you have a powerful command of the language, but I meant superior, not as a black woman, just period. You're eloquent,
right.
you're poetic, you shape the conversation. You're mellifluous. You have like a melodic sense, so people can
Mm.
listen to you for long periods of time because of your presentation. But that has nothing. But if I just said you're articulate, I can see that being taken. Because look, again, there's a history in American politics of dumb white men talking about Barack Obama, saying, "Oh, he's actually very intelligent. He's actually articulate." It's like
Right. And
as if
so we
they
got
don't
into this
expect that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And we got into this conversation because when you said that to me, I asked you, I was like, I've actually been called like articulate by a lot of white people in my life. And I said, what is the expectation that I wouldn't be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into a conversation about microaggressions, and that actually, when typically when a white person says to a black person, "Oh, you're articulate," like in sort of like a surprise way, it's like, "Oh, we didn't expect you to speak this way." And then I said, "Well, I'm not articulate for a black person, or, um, I speak better than most white people too." And that has got nothing to do with my race. That's just has I'm I'm international. I speak a lot of languages, and I'm, highly educated. So I've had to learn to speak a certain way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that in general, when white people do say that about black people, it is a microaggression. Like, we don't expect you to speak this way,
Right.
you know?
So the people who I spend most of my time with in this world would never make that statement. Not even because they're sensitive to microaggressions. They're just not stupid racist. I had a guy on my radio show years ago at WVOX. It's so funny when I said that I went into my radio voice. And he said, "Oh, I had this African American woman on my show, and she was actually very intelligent." And I went off on this guy. I was like, "What do you mean?"
Like, actually
I
very
said,
intelligent.
"Clearly, you're not." I said because you're on the air saying something that stupid, and and this is another one. A friend of mine who was, Thomas Sowell is a conservative economist in the United States. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. And somebody referred to him as the smartest black economist in America. I said, I would argue he's the smartest economist. Like, I don't get that, again, I talk about Roberto Sharp, my mentor, my Tai Chi instructor, but he's my mentor. He's not the smartest black man I know. He's the smartest man I know. And it irks me, even if it's just, I don't know what that is. It's got to be just ignorance or microaggression, meaning it's so ingrained in our society, and I hear black men do it also.
Let me tell you about, okay, I'm not gonna bash black men. That's not what
No,
this
no, no,
channel
and
is.
I'm
But let me just say this. Um, the statement for a black person, this statement is also very, sorry, I will never, I keep doing the Trump
go
hands.
man, go,
I've been watching the news too much.
go.
Okay. So I'll talk like this from now on. Instead of this, it's like this.
What does that
Uh,
mean? Does that mean
well,
you're
if this is Trump, this is
uh
like not Trump. So I'll
just
talk like
come on,
this.
just talk the way you talk. Come on, hey, do it like a paisan. Hey,
Anyway, so another thing that is very common, especially in the black community, it's like, oh, you're beautiful for a black woman, or or this specifically, and this is within the black community, right? It's like, you know, how you have your dark skinned people and lighter skinned people within the black community. And a very common statement that a dark skinned woman would hear is like, oh, if, I mean, if she's pretty, right? If someone finds her pretty, it's like, oh, you're pretty for a dark skinned person, as though there's this expectation that dark skinned people are not attractive. So, like, when someone is attractive from that is dark skinned, it's like for, you know, for a dark skinned person. And it's kind of the same thing going back to the whole like, you know, you speak well for a black person. Like, how about, you know, I speak well, period. Right. And I think, just like you said, like with the economist, not a black economist, an economist.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, I mean, I mean, that's why I'm not to go back. This is the last I will say about Andrew Schultz. I'm not into like the whole hate train or whatever. But the reason why that was so bothersome is like, why wasn't that statement just like about women in general, that women can be difficult, like women can be like a little bossy and this and that? It's not just black women, you know, that have this stereotype attached to them. Women in general have this stereotype attached to them, that we're a little bit whiny, we're a bit bossy and this and that, right? But why is it that in that joke he had to say black women and not women in general? Because he's protecting his own, right? He has a wife that is white, so of course
Mm-hmm.
he's not going to go out there and say like, oh, a white woman is like this and that, right? Um, Meanwhile, the black men were just sitting there like little puppets, kikiing with him,
Mm-hmm.
instead of being like, listen, don't go there.
You know, again, it comes back to like if you look at, see again, Bill Burr, when he makes statements like that, you know he's joking because he throws himself under the bus during it. Right. So if I could imagine him saying, you know, like a black woman's going to smack me in the face, of course that's because I'm an asshole who thinks he can get away. You know, like he'll do it in a way that, and I just, again, I think with Andrew Schultz, I think if another comedian who everybody liked said that, it would be less offensive, because I've seen people be funny about that stuff. But now, look, I happen to have a very nice wife. She's very sweet. My son's mother is Korean. Her being Korean has nothing to do with the fact that she would scare me when she would go into a rage. Not because I was physically afraid, because I thought I was going to go to jail, because I thought I was going to have to throw her out the window, like literally in my face, like raging. I know Italian women like that. I know Korean women like that. I know black women like that. I know Puerto Rican women like that. And
And
I
you know,
know,
white women like
and
that,
I know white women like that, and I know
right?
white men like that who are white trash who beat their girls. So it really, to make it about a color, a race, or even a man or woman is ridiculous.
It's disgusting.
There are broken people and there are lovely people, and like it's again, you know, the idea that we have a genetic predisposition to anything other than athletics. I'm just kidding. Bill Burr does that whole thing on black athletes and how.
Well, let me call you out a little bit, Eric.
Go ahead.
And you know, it's that time of my cycle.
Uh huh.
So, um, so I'm in like, you know, I'm just calling
Call
things
me
out.
out.
Uh, I mean, not to the extent of Andrew Schultz, of course, but like you've been sort of guilty of that too, right? Where you've been like, you don't really see me as a black woman. I mean, now you do because we had a lot of conversations, but there were times when I would speak in a certain way and you were like, oh, you sound like a white person speaking like a black person when I said
Mm-hmm.
something, right? Um your friend the other day, and maybe that was a black person, but it doesn't matter. Black people are, you know, do this also, you
Mm-hmm.
know. um Someone looked at me and said, well, she doesn't look black,
Right.
she probably looks more Indian, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
someone commented on a video and said, why is this person referring to herself as a black person, she's not even black? Like, I am black, right? I'm
I know you are.
100% black. um so I also feel this thing where I feel like, and I also want to say this, I had a boyfriend in law school, super rich, Jewish, like really like, and he would say stuff like, what I love about you, one of the things that I love about you is that you're exotic but safe, you know?
Mm.
Exotic but safe. So it's like, I'm not like the other black people that he thinks are unsafe, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
maybe I show up in a certain way that's like, you know, like okay to him, right? And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that's okay at all. That that I feel like white people sometimes try to claim me into their tribe because they're like, no, 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 no. We can't have her be part of the black tribe
Mm-hmm.
because we have all these stereotypes about black people and she doesn't fit into that,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's educated. She looks a certain way. She talks a certain way. No, 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 no. Let's try to claim her into like as part of the black tribe. So like I get a lot of like, oh, but you're not really black. Even here in Sweden, where I grew up, I used to hear like, you know, my own friends, like white Swedish people say to me like, you're not like the other immigrants. Then it wasn't even like a black thing. It's like you're not like the other immigrants. You're different. You're like more part of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt horrible because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you're talking about my parents that came in here as like immigrants and like so and they don't speak Swedish well or whatever. So you're
Right.
talking crap about my parents, but you're
Yeah.
kind of trying to claim me. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel the same way when white people, including like what you did the other day, it's like it's like almost like you're trying to bring me into like whiteness,
Right.
which tells me that there's something wrong with blackness. I'm not
No.
saying you did that. I'm just saying like there's this thing where people try to say like, you know, you're not black, you're not white, or you're not this or that, right?
Well, look. I mean, for starters, I was totally what Pam said. I just thought was funny coming from her, not from me. I wouldn't have said what she said, and I repeated it to you. So I'm sorry if you took offense to
No, no,
that.
no. Black people do it too. It's just a discussion. I'm not
Yeah.
saying
No,
that.
I
Yeah.
totally get it. So, well, I'll give you one of my favorite. Um, this is like a version of that, and again, this is about Asian and not black. But somebody walked up. My daughter's mother is very. When I say very Chinese looking, she just has a classic Chinese face. She does. She didn't look like a hipster American. You know, she was born and raised in the United States, and she's modern and educated, and she's not like a a poor immigrant in Chinatown. And this guy walked up to her in the dog run in Tompkins Square Park, and he said, first of all, I don't know why people speak loud when they think you speak another language, but he said, "Hi, where are you from?" And she said, "Chicago. Where are you from?" Like, and it was just hilarious, but it is a thing, and I get annoyed when people, even people of color, refer to me as American and themselves as African American. I'm saying, well, you're American too. They go, oh yeah, but you know what I mean. And like the idea that it's white people, Americans are white people, fucking annoys me because
Mm.
families of like people who are descended from slaves in the United States have more claim to this land than I do because I came here after them. And when my family came here, there was already the emancipation. So there are black men and women in this country who have more claim just by time and right than I do. So and I'm not sensitive to that. I don't think because I want to be like woke or not have microaggressions because those are going to come out in everybody. But I think if you read a book, you have to acknowledge that I came later than everyone. I'm an Italian immigrant from like 1900.
Yeah.
So I get it. It's a weird thing, and I think it's a lack of education sometimes.
Yeah.
It,
And I think it's also like it's okay to admit that you have like some microaggression for whatever reason, whether it's like your upbringing or whatever. It's like the first, I mean, I have microaggressions against men
mm-hmm.
sometimes, right? Especially when I'm on my period or like right before. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm being honest. For some reason, when I feel kind of like rageful a little bit, which is like the week leading up, and for our male listeners, this is good for you guys to listen to also, right? Because you can learn a thing or two about your girlfriends and wives. But the week it actually starts like a week leading up to the period, and then a day before, a day or two before, it's like rage and hormones, and you're just like, and I if I want to take it out on someone, for some reason, it's like a man. It's like, and that makes me realize, oh, I think I have some type of, I don't know if it's, you would call it a microaggression. I don't know if it's specifically for a certain type of aggression, um, but I'm using it now in conversation. Um, I do feel like that microaggression. Like if a woman walked in here now, I would be like, oh, hi, sweetie, like. But if it's a guy, I'll just be like, oh, shut up. And I think that comes from my
It's nice to be on the
upbringing.
show with you. I'm glad we didn't do it yesterday.
No, but I've already warned you. Like I'll be a sweet angel again in 2 days.
Look,
But but I know where that comes from. That's my point. I'm not sitting here like all oblivious to the fact that like I do sometimes have a little bit of like microaggression against like men, not you, like a man,
Mhm.
because like I grew up with like men that were very like hard on me and very like punishing and very like I grew up with very like punishing men, and I there's a part of me that's just kind of like wants to give it back, right? But I'm
Mhm.
not a child anymore. Like I can't give it back to the people that inflicted injury upon me. But there's
Mhm.
still that um something inside of me that makes me feel like men are the cause of, but it's just hormones in the end of the day. It's just hormones.
So right now, look, but you make a great point. Now I want to ask you this question. So I told you about the woman Dawn who met me in the subway, banker, wealthy, threw money in my bucket. Next time she threw her card in, and we ended up dating. And she thought because I had long hair and flip flops, and I was a 31-year-old beach bum looking guy. She objectified me completely. Like she thought I was like an elf, and I didn't have like, you know what I mean? But I'm going to tell you something else though. I played the Glastonbury Festival in 2004, which was like an amazing experience because there's like 100,000 people.
Wow.
It
I would
was just
love to see pictures.
yeah. That's I hope I have pictures. I have some
Yeah.
stadiums from that tour. But I played all of the biggest. I did David Letterman that week before I went over. I did the Glastonbury Festival. I did a stadium called Fitzgerald Stadium in Killarney, Ireland. It was really like it was. Those were the first times I ever got on stages and venues that big. It was amazing. But I met a girl. She was a school teacher, and she was kind of hitting on me. And my hair was actually dyed black at the time because the artist I was working with wanted everybody to look like him, and he was ugly. I don't get it, but and she kept saying, "Oh, I'm like, listen." And she was like 23, and I was in my 30s. I said, "Listen, you don't know who I am. She's like, "No, but you're so handsome and you're charismatic the way you play guitar." And she was going on, and finally, I looked at her and I said, "I voted for George W. Bush." And she said, "You did not." I said, "No, no, really, I did." And she was arguing with me because I had long hair and I was in a rock band. She objectified. She put me in a box like, "Oh, I'm claiming you as a white girl." She was claiming me as like a left of center, like peace loving hippie guitar player, and I'm a fucking maniac. Now I regret voting for George Bush at this point in my life, but I didn't then, and it wasn't her right to tell me. So I know that's not a cultural thing where I was a slave. That's not like a crazy ass thing like that, but we build ideas in all the time based on something, and that's like an innocent version of it. So I can understand. I don't understand why people can't just admit that we make mistakes and make assumptions.
Yeah, I agree. Please subscribe so that we can bring you guys more content like this. Appreciate y'all. Later.
Dance.